So I'm Mark from Genton. I'm very pleased to be able to share Reservoir Station with you. I'll run through kind of the, the site conditions, some of the challenges, design response, and then I'll walk you through the finished building. Just by way of context, so Reservoir Station sits within the very centre of the suburb of Reservoir. It's 12.5 kilometres north of the city. It's about halfway along the Mernda train line, and the main driver for this project is the level crossing removal project. So the station, it's a new station on top of an existing at-grade rail crossing. So the site itself, which is surrounded by the red line, sits very much in the centre of the suburb. So on either side of the site, it's basically almost an island. You've got these two massive north-south 6-lane roads, and this corridor of the rail corridor plus those two big roads really cuts the suburb very much in two. And those two areas highlighted in orange are the two retail high streets of Reservoir, Edwardes Street to the west, Broadway to the east. They're so separated historically that they've actually kind of developed distinct characters, which the Urban Council has kind of documented, which is an interesting aside. The site also sits directly on top of some of the original Melbourne water infrastructure, so the reservoirs which the suburb got its name from, as well as sitting over the pipe, one of the original water pipes for Melbourne. So the original station, it was a fairly nondescript building, as you can see. Those are kind of the busy roads, so you can only really experience the old station across several lanes of traffic. Very hostile pedestrian terrain, very difficult, very convoluted to cross from one high street to the other. And of course the at-grade crossing in the middle exacerbated that. So our concept was fairly simple. The idea was that we wanted the station building itself to be a significant wayfinding hub, a signifier for the suburb, but to facilitate a much stronger east-west connection, linking those two high streets, as well as improving through new planting some degraded land around this train station itself to re-stitch some north and south green areas to create a north-south ecological corridor. So I should note as well, this project didn't have a huge budget like some of the other level crossings to acquire sites and extend the site through public space. So we're relying on the architecture to try and facilitate that improved east-west connection. So the existing station and at-grade crossing is a significant barrier to the east-west connection. The elevation of the rail immediately creates possibilities for improved connections for bikes and pedestrians, as well as obviously traffic improvements. So the main thing we wanted to do was carefully place the station entry and this public plaza that aligned with that view corridor to facilitate a much better crossing for pedestrians as well as visual connection, and create kind of a moment of respite as you're crossing from one side to the other. We then wanted to activate that plaza with connections to the station both on the northern side and the southern side, so you can see with entrances and then stairs going up in both directions. This is a relatively small thing, but actually something we have to fight really hard for throughout the project. The addition of a second gate line is a big deal for the rail operators. And then the issue of scale. It's 150 metres across from one side to the other. So, and you're viewing this thing either from a car or from across over the top of cars. So we wanted big canopies to announce that there is something significant here. And we've split the canopies to preserve the view corridor. And then the canopies have been shaped to frame the view and kind of define the public space. So that was the original concept idea. The idea being that the two canopies form almost an arch, which frames that key connection view. So if you can look from one high street to the other, get a real sense that you are connected to the other side. And then the form kind of tapers out north-south to open to a gateway for trains to come and go. So it translated fairly literal to the final station form. This is the long section. The building is very simple because the budget was relatively tight for this. So in plan and in short section, it's a very simple building. It's really the long section and the east and west elevations that are doing all the work addressing the two sides of the suburb. But you can get a sense of the open space between the canopies and then the two entrances either side taking up commuters to the platform. So here's how the final building sits in its context. You can get a sense of the scale of the canopies. You can hopefully see the gap in the canopies aligning with those streets. The planting is hard to see, but the idea is once it grows, it will kind of re-stitch a missing link in the green north-south connection. This view is taken on that central plaza, looking from one side to the other. You get a sense that you can see through to the activity on the other side. The other important thing that we wanted to do was, through materiality, reference really closely Reservoir. So brick was chosen in shades of brown for the public plaza to reference some of the post-war, more domestic architecture of Reservoir. But water was the key thing, water and infrastructure. We want to celebrate the good elements of the new infrastructure, in particular the concrete U-troughs. And we also wanted to reference the historical infrastructure, so water. So, for example, those seats are designed to be reference the shape of culverts. The screen itself is designed to reference rippling water at the surface of a pool. So this was achieved, I guess, through a gentle undulation, but the real way we tried to do this was through the materiality. So a perforated metal gives translucency, so you get some shadow and depth. But most importantly, we fought really hard for this to be anodized and not powder coated, because you get a much greater luster, it's much more changeable, and the photos probably don't do justice to the changeable nature because they're taken, basically at the same time. But it ranges from silver to grey to bright white, depending on the lighting conditions.
Sorry, 2 minutes left.
It also obviously allows you to see through, which allows you to get activity inside, because you're crossing big roads to get to the concourse. We worked hard to coordinate all the paraphernalia to make it really clean. As you ascend to the platform, it's to be light and bright and give views across the suburb. And you get a sense of how transparent the material is once you're inside. And then the celebration of infrastructure. So the U-troughs, which are those concrete culverts, we painted everything black underneath to be recessive, to really celebrate those elements that run through. We deliberately didn't decorate or cover them. And the canopies are designed to work around and under them, as well as the big steel bridge that gently curves across the crossing to the north, which is a hugely impressive piece of engineering. And so the final image really gives a sense, hopefully ties back to the original concept diagram. So the placement of the public space is very literally in the centre of the suburb. The gaps in the canopies allowing the connections through. The strong celebration of infrastructure to reference the new material, the new significant transport infrastructure, and then the constant references to water and the history of Reservoir itself. And you can start to get a sense of the green connection that goes off to the north, but obviously the planting around the station building needs to grow, but in time we're hopeful it'll re-stitch and link into the green space that sits directly to the south.